Hey guys, welcome to Boxing Squared for boxing news and views from around the internet. Post-fight review for Efe Ajagba and Joe Goodall, the top-rank main event. So this was, as expected, a relatively fun fight, with both guys trying to land big shots, but Efe Ajagba, the bigger puncher, ultimately starting to wear down Joe Goodall through rounds 3 in particular, and he got the job done in round 4. So we'll go straight to the stoppage because I know that this one will be somewhat controversial. So you had a right hand going in. It wobbles Goodall clearly. He was on shaky legs. He was trying to tie up, hold on to Efe Ajagba, but Ajagba was on him, letting his hands go, getting free of the clinch, and he was just unloading. But Goodall probably should have taken a knee, but didn't. But he was still defending himself. He wasn't necessarily throwing back, but he was blocking a lot of shots, or other shots weren't really coming in. There was only maybe 1 or 2 clean punches as he sort of went back to the ropes and actually took, and Tony Weeks jumps straight in. So for Goodall, I'm sure that he will be very bitterly disappointed. He expressed his dismay to the referee, Tony Weeks, but Efe Ajagba gets the win. I think it was a premature stoppage, but at the end of the day, let's face it, it was only going one way. Joe Goodall was in all sorts of trouble, and that was only going downhill from that point onwards. And Efe Ajagba, pretty good performance. He looked good in this fight. Behind the jab in the opening round, he was just pinging Joe Goodall with jabs the first couple of rounds in particular. Right hand started to land more with regularity in round 2, and then Ajagba started to work in the uppercut. And in round 3, that was a huge weapon, and more than one occasion, Joe Goodall eats an uppercut and visibly is wobbled. And he, heading out of round 3, looked like a guy who was starting to be worn down by the weight of Efe Ajagba's very heavy hands. Ajagba, good jab, good right hand, and even if he wasn't landing completely flush, or he was just catching Goodall with some of these right hands, even in a glancing manner, very hard shots, but the uppercut certainly started to shake Goodall up. And obviously, as we know, in round 4, it was a right hand that his legs, really started, it betrayed him, because Ajagba, for a second, didn't really react. And then once he realized he was hurt, he was on him. And as we know, it was all over not too long after that. There will be some criticism for the referee that I'm sure, but Tony Weeks will probably say, look, this was a good stoppage, and these are the reasons why. Effectively, something like you had a case of Joe Goodall not throwing back. He was on unsteady legs, and he was shipping some punishment. On the replay, maybe it wasn't as much punishment as it looked live, but ultimately, it's moot now. That win is in the books. It's not the worst stoppage I've seen, but it wasn't great. Probably was a few seconds early. But Joe Goodall could have been laid out flat on the canvas by one of Ajagba's punches in those couple of seconds afterwards. So, I mean, it is what it is. Not great. But at the end of the day, it was all going one way. But overall, good performance for Efe Ajagba. But I think there would be... It would be wise not to go over the top with this. You had Mark Kriegel in the ring afterwards talking about, the difference of, Ajagba from a while ago, all this sort of stuff, and how much he'd improved and that sort of thing. I've been saying in recent years, Ajagba has been an improving fighter, but there is incremental steps, and I don't think the leap is as great as it's probably being made out to be by Top Rank in the broadcast. His trainer, actually, Kei Karoma, had talked about he wasn't used to movers previously, and he's gotten much better with that. Well, that's not what we really had tonight. There was only a little bit of movement in a couple of rounds from Goodall, but for the most part, this was a style that suited Efe Ajagba, a guy who likes to let his hands go and who was standing right there in front of him for the most part. It was a style that was tailor-made for Ajagba, who wants his man in front of him and throwing some shots so then he can let his jab go, the long straight punches, those heavy hands, and as we saw, the uppercut. So Goodall probably didn't do himself any favours because he wasn't boxing and moving. I think there was expected to be a little bit more of that. And it just wasn't a hugely effective performance by Goodall. But he got some big right hands in through the fight. But the thing is, Ajagba ate them. But for the most part, wasn't enough success to really trouble Ajagba, to put him on the back foot. And as soon as Goodall started to take some punishment, what we saw was the tenor of the fight shift. So what next? Well, that's interesting because he was asked that question, and actually a couple of times in the post-fight interview, but he deliberately did not really say anything. He was asked about Zhang Jilei, who was in the audience. He basically said, look, I'll go away, we'll talk to my team, da-da-da-da-da. He was given another bite at the cherry, but just sort of said that he'd worked hard in camp, he was ready to go, and whatever comes my way, I'm ready. At the start of the post-fight interview, when he was asked what's changed, one of the things that he did also say was now that he's fighting with true confidence. And I think that's one of the things that Top Rank has done with the matchmaking since that fight with Stephen Shaw. Ajagba was coming back from injury into that one, looked a little tentative at times. Both guys not throwing enough punches or pulling the trigger. You had a more aggressive Ajagba in there tonight, but then again, styles make fights. As we saw against Zan Kosabutski, he was very aggressive, but 3 fights and 3 wins in 2023. It's a very good year for Efe Ajagba. Look at the rest of the division, hardly anyone's fighting. But you also have to just dampen expectations a little bit because Ajagba's still on the outside looking in. What is he, somewhere between top 10 and top 20, there or thereabouts. He's a good fighter with a growing resume, but a lot of the fighters that he's been facing are probably considered to be lower on the depth chart. Ahead of this fight, I said it's going to be a fun fight for as long as it lasts. We'll have a situation where Ajagba is going to eventually start catching Goodall and probably stop him. And ultimately, that's what we got. But we knew what Goodall was about, what his strengths were, and what was likely to happen if he ate something big. He might have been able to go toe-to-toe with a lighter punching Justasuni, but against Efe Ajagba, it was always a much tougher ask for the sort of style Joe Goodall has been employing in recent fights. But he can come again. He can obviously be in some good fun fights. He is a good fighter, maybe somewhere top 30 to top 40 level, there or thereabouts. He can give good work and spring the odd upset, as we saw with Stephen Shaw. Ajagba, where next, who next? Well, it's interesting. His wife was ringside, and actually she said, when the camera panned to her, Fury, Usyk, all your. See, the thing is, he's not really in the conversation for those fights. I mean, he needs to be fighting some of those guys that are sort of out of that sort of top 5 or 6, the big names that are sort of there or thereabouts. I'm not sure that Ajagba's done enough to get himself in the conversation. But a fight with a Zhang Jilei, who was in the crowd, yeah, good fight. And that should be potentially possible because you have Frank Warren and Top Rank, which do work together. Joe Joyce, that would be a good fight. But there's also a risk and reward element because Ajagba probably isn't going to bring a big pot of money and he's dangerous. So does that mean a lot of guys probably are going to avoid him? And promotional considerations are also a factor. Tyson Fury's not going to entertain that. Alexander Usyk's not going to entertain that. If anything, Usyk would fight his mandatories and the undisputed fight. Those would be the only fights he would be considering. Tyson Fury, well, he's never going to fight Ajagba in a million years. There's no money in it for him. But you have guys like Luis Ortiz, Andy Ruiz Jr., Dillian White. There's a whole bundle of guys, but a lot of them will also probably turn their nose up and go, there's nothing there for me. He's got nothing for me. But he does have the WBC silver title, so that's not to be discounted. He will go higher in the rankings when they're updated again, I'm sure. But it's probably not going to guarantee him a fight. He needs to get into some sort of final eliminator, either with the WBC or elsewhere. Because let's face it, like a Martin Bakole, Aslanbek Makhmedov, some of those types of guys, they're in the who needs him club, if we're realistic. If those guys were fighting each other, I mean, maybe Ajagba and Makhmedov, they're both with Top Rank. Makes a lot of sense. But I'm sure their handlers and promoters would be a little bit reticent potentially because it's all well and good. A guy in Joe Goodall, he's not in the Top Rank stable, who had an upset win, he's expendable. Aslanbek Makhmedov's handlers have been building him up to a certain level, say like Bakole and also Ajagba for a number of years. They're looking for big fights, big money, to get the payoff on the investment. Ajagba versus Makhmedov, well, it'd be fun. It'd be a war. Lots of bombs landed, I'm sure. Probably not going to be likely to be made. I'd love it if it was, but we'll see what's next for Ajagba. But good performance. On the undercard, there was the new recent top-ranked signing, Brandon Moore. He was facing Robert Sims, so he got the win there. Did drop him along the way. I only caught snippets of it because I was watching another fight on another card. But I did watch the Skylar Lacy and Antonio Mireles fight, which was very entertaining. It was a tale of two halves, just a 6-rounder, but you had Skylar Lacy coming out the stronger of the two in the first 3 rounds and put in a very good performance. Arguably could have been up 3-0 after those 3 rounds, but then he started to sort of taper off, and Mireles started to, land that straight left hand, having success, and arguably he won the final 3 rounds. So you had a 58-56 card and 2 that were 57 all, so a majority draw. Probably a fair result in all likelihood. So, 3 heavyweight fights on the card, the Mireles and Skylar Lacy one. I wouldn't mind seeing them running that one back, actually. And then you had Ajagba rolls on, the silent roller as it were. Where he goes in 2024, it's a big question. What do you make of it all? Drop a comment loud and often. Hit like, hit subscribe, follow me on Twitter. Boxing_squared. I'm out.